Hi, I'm Keith Cooper from Northlight Images, and this is the Canon Pixma PRO-200 printer, and in this short video I'm just going to look at printing on art papers with it. Now, this is not using custom sizes or anything like that for greetings cards and the like, which it will handle. This is just using ordinary art paper. You might notice that I've got a sheet at the back of the printer here, and this is for the rear feed slot. Now, with older Canon printers, they were quite touchy about what types of paper you put into different slots. The 200 and also the 300 as well, which I've also looked at, is much improved in that area. Basically, unless you're putting a really heavy paper in, you don't need to use this back slot anymore. So I'm going to print with the same art paper via the top slot. Now, this is quite a heavy paper. It's Canon Fine Art Museum Etching. There are lots of papers available like this, and many of them give good results. Although I would say that you need ICC profiles for the paper. I'll cover ICC profiles elsewhere when I do a full review of this printer, but this is just looking at using a paper like this. Now I can open the printer up and put a sheet in there. I've set the width. This is A3, so 13 inch by 19 inch. I put that back, and the printer wants to know what sort of paper it is. I always set it in this. It just saves me getting things wrong a few times. It's A3, it's heavyweight art paper is the setting I'm using for this one. It's important to use the media setting that was used for creation of the profile that you're using. It does make quite a difference for some papers. Some you might not notice it, others it'll come out wrong and you may not know why if you haven't set the paper setting right. But anyway, we're okay for that. It's loaded up, heavyweight art paper. I would say that with this top slot, and I have used this and I'll do it now, you can actually, I'm not sure whether it's recommended or not, you can put multiple sheets in, even of a heavy paper like this. The paper feed mechanism on the 200 is, and the 300, because it's very similar, is very good. Canon do paper feeding well. I'll give them credit for that. So I have loaded 5 sheets of this paper in. I'm sure it's more than you're supposed to, but it worked perfectly fine. The paper, when it's fed in, there is a de-skewing mechanism. You can see the paper judder about a bit when it goes in as the printer lines it up and makes sure it's okay. I'm not technically sure whether I should have multiple sheets in here, but it works. One other thing, these papers, they're quite similar, the two surfaces. The ink receptor coating that's applied to the papers is only on one side normally. So that means you have to put the paper in the right way. And I have put sheets in the wrong way. This is a test image made on this same paper. And one of the ways of finding that you've got it is moisten your finger and touch the corner and rub it slightly. If you compare the two, one side will feel slightly tackier than the other. That's the side that's got the ink coating. So that's a colour test print made using this paper whilst I was setting up and when I was doing the profiling for it, and it's very good. Anyway, I'm going to print from this using the Canon print layout software. You could print from Lightroom, you could print from Photoshop or whatever. I'm using the Canon software because it's quite good, it's free, and also if I use that, I haven't got to explain why I'm using old bits of software elsewhere, and it's of more relevance to more people. If you haven't tried the Canon software, do give it a go. It's capable of some quite good results. Anyway, over to doing some printing. Here's the image I've opened up. It's a black and white image, and some people say you can't get good results from for black and white from dye-based printers like this. I disagree. You can, but you have to take some care. Now, I'll be discussing this more in an article I'm going to be writing about printing black and white, and that will follow the review that I'm doing. But this is just a quick example. Now, I've opened it in Professional Print and Layout. It's identified the printer. Let's just go to a few settings. First up, the print settings. I've set heavyweight fine art paper, set the page size to A3+. It's got a border at the moment. Actually, just because I can, I'm going to select Borderless Printing. It's set for the top feed. Print quality is set for high. High quality does give you a benefit on the Pro-200. Doesn't take much longer. I find gives better looking results most of the time. Colour management. Now this is quite important. I'm using an ICC profile. I'm not using the black and white print mode here. Now on the Pro-300, I would say use the black and white print mode. It's excellent. However, I have found that for black and white prints, certainly on a paper like this, I get the best results using a custom profile. Now this is something you're going to have to experiment with if you're doing black and white, but I'm using a profile I created. All these profiles are available on request for non-commercial use if anyone wants to use them. They'll be listed in the review when I've done it. But anyway, there it is. That's the setting there. I've got rendering intent here and black point compensation. Now, since it's a matte paper, I'm also going to use the soft proofing option, where suddenly the picture looks darker. This is giving an indication of what it's going to look like. Just go there, I'll select black point compensation. Since I know for most profiles on a paper like this, black point compensation helps. I'll just switch over to perceptual here, and we see that it does look slightly different. After a moment or two, the printer wakes up and it will draw a sheet of paper in and we'll start printing. As you see, 2 sheets, heavy art paper, no problem loading it. As I said, I'll give Canon the due for paper handling. Both the Pro-300 and the Pro-200 are excellent. For borderless printing, it does start off a bit slow because it's having to take extra care around the edges here. Then it will speed up. So this will take a few minutes to print, but you wouldn't save much time if you printed using the standard print quality setting. It makes very little difference with this printer. I think it's worth using the high quality print settings. Here comes the leading edge of the print. No damage on the corners. So when you're using papers like this, printing borderless, do make sure the paper's not damaged, it's not bent, has bent corners. The print head flies pretty low over the paper when it's printing, and if it hits the paper, it will make a mess. At best, it will smudge slightly. At worst, it will mess up the inside of the printer, and you'll need to clean things. So be careful with large sheets of stiff paper like this. It's the print coming out. The dye-based inks of the Pro-200 actually give darker blacks on an art paper like this than I would get on the Pro-300 or a larger format printer with pigment-based inks. You think, well, why not use dye-based inks all the time? Well, slight problem, and I'll show when this comes out, is that the neutrality of the black and white image is very dependent on the viewing lighting. Now, where I'm shooting this at the moment, I have LED replacement spot lamps in the ceiling, where halogen lights are now LED lights, and I've got another LED lamp lighting things up. That means that the light spectrum that I'm getting, the combination, is quite variable. Now, depending on the light, the print may have a purple or a greenish tinge to it when you look at it. Now, I'm sure that if I take this over to the window and use daylight, it will look bang on neutral. But be careful when printing with a dye-based printer if you're using certain types of lighting. Unfortunately, you don't know in advance which ones are going to cause a problem and which ones aren't. Now, with this lighting I've got in here, as it stands, this print coming out here looks pretty good. Now, I'm not going to try and show the subtleties of colours on this video here. I don't have the video recording equipment to do very precise and accurate colour, but it looks good. I might say there's a slight coloured tinge to it, but there's very little. So for people who say you can't do black and white on dye-based printers, certainly this one you can. For people who say that they're excellent, well, yes, they can be. But under some lighting, black and white may look a little off. Now, this can have an effect on colour prints as well. And I've noticed it in an example like this, printed on the same paper here, where the blue sky in the lighting here from the ceiling has an ever so slight purplish tinge. Whereas if I mix the lighting with the LED light I've got over here, it looks spot on blue. So essentially you can get great looking prints off dye-based inks like this, particularly on papers like this, and metallic papers. I've got quite a few papers I'm going to try and show examples of, but just be wary that sometimes with dye-based inks the colours can come out a little on the skew. Even good profiling won't necessarily help that. Now, there we go, there's the print. That's the steps at Wells Cathedral. I've printed this at A2, so it's no problem printing it on a sheet of A3 plus paper like this. But anyway, you do get great results from printing from this. What I would say is get good profiles, get good papers, be prepared to experiment. If you've used another printer, don't think, my favourite paper was brand such and such on this other printer. I'll buy 20 boxes of it to use with this new printer. You can't tell in advance which papers are going to be best for which printer. Now, I've got another video that looks at choosing papers and some of the problems that you get with that and why you might want to go through the process. But do bear in mind that when you get a new printer, your previous favourite paper may not look as good as you thought it did. So just something to be wary of. I've got some really nice prints out of this. I have no difficulty in using it. I would happily use this for producing prints to give to people. But if you want a bit more in precision in the colour, then perhaps that's one of the reasons you might want to look at the Pro-300. Now, I will be doing comparison of the two at some point, but I have to say I've been very pleased with the Pro-200 so far. Thank you.